For as long as anyone could remember, the galactic map had been the way every species understood the universe. Stars, planets, wormholes, and trade routes were all drawn with precision, spanning countless light years. Every species, from the smallest explorers to the grand empires, had a copy. And yet, there was one thing that was the same in every single version, no matter who drew it, no matter how advanced they were. At the edge of the map, everything just stopped. There was nothing beyond that point. No stars, no signs of life, no wormholes, nothing that could be recorded or charted. The only label where there should have been more space read simply, human space. And every species remembered it. Every species knew where it began. Every species knew where it ended. But no one dared question it, no one dared cross it. Not even once. To younger civilizations, this seemed strange, almost silly. Why not go there? They asked one another. The humans have always been a small species. What can they possibly do to stop us? But the older species, those who had lived through centuries of war, exploration, and history, would shake their heads. They wouldn't speak of it in public. They wouldn't write about it in their records. Some would simply stare at the map and mutter a warning to themselves, as if thinking about it too much might make something happen. No one could say exactly when the fear began. The oldest scrolls and records suggested that thousands of years ago there had been expeditions, small fleets of alien ships that dared to approach the boundary. At first, nothing happened. Then, over time, those fleets disappeared without a trace. Ships sent to investigate returned broken, warped, or entirely empty. Some came back with only fragments of their data logs. The most famous record ended with a message written in multiple alien languages, a warning that no one understood fully. Do not approach the blue worlds. After that, curiosity was replaced by caution. Young species were taught to leave that part of the galaxy alone. Maps were drawn carefully, always ending at human space. And over time, the story became legend. It became part of the culture of countless civilizations. Do not go there, they would say to their children, for the humans are protected by powers we do not understand. And everyone obeyed. It was not only fear that kept the galaxy away from human space. There was also awe. Stories had been passed down through generations about humans, though no one had seen them for centuries. They were described as small, fragile, and yet somehow terrifying. Some said that humans had survived threats that would have destroyed entire civilizations. Others said humans had weapons unlike any other species had ever seen. The truth, as far as anyone knew, was lost to time. But the feeling remained, the sense that humans were not to be underestimated. Even in the present day, the rule was clear. No one crossed the border. Trading ships avoided it. Explorers turned back when their charts led them near the edge. Military, fleets patrolled nearby systems but not beyond them. And still, younger species would sometimes whisper. They would wonder secretly what was out there, and then they would look at the maps, at the boundary that ended in human space, and the whispers would die. Because everyone who had asked, who had dared to question, had never come back to answer. On the surface, human space appeared empty. Stars twinkled faintly in the distance, planets rotated silently in their orbits, and dust clouds drifted lazily across the void. But even in the calm, there was something different. Ships entering this region reported strange readings. Sensors would fail, communication systems would flicker, and strange energy waves would interfere with their instruments. It was as if the very fabric of space itself was different here, an invisible wall that no one could see, but that everyone could feel. The older species had explanations, of course. Some said it was a natural phenomenon, a quirk of physics that no one had yet understood. Some said it was a trap, set by humans or by the universe itself. Others simply shrugged and refused to think about it at all. But the truth, the thing, that no one dared speak aloud was that they did not know. And what they did not know frightened them more than anything else. Despite the fear, curiosity never fully died. Young explorers, scholars, and dreamers often tried to imagine what human space looked like. They studied old transmissions, recovered fragments of data, and pieced together stories passed down through generations. Humans, they learned, were not like other species. They could survive almost anything. They adapted to environments that would kill most life forms. They had technology that seemed impossible, yet always practical. And most of all, they had survived the great disasters that had reshaped the galaxy countless times. It was these stories that kept the legend alive, even as the galaxy moved on. Even as new species arose and old empires fell, the map stayed the same. Human space remained the boundary of everything known. It was a place of mystery, fear, and fascination all at once. And every species, from the smallest traders to the grandest empires, obeyed that boundary without question. One young historian from the Tholiri species once tried to understand why. They spent years collecting old logs, listening to whispered accounts, and analyzing the strange energy readings near the border. But every time they thought they were close to a breakthrough, the data would vanish. Storage systems would fail. Satellites would disappear. And sometimes even the historian's own memory of events would seem incomplete, as if something, or someone, was deliberately erasing the knowledge. The historian eventually gave up. The boundary remained unbroken, and the galaxy moved on. Yet, whenever they looked at the maps, there was a sense of awe that could not be explained. That line, that simple mark indicating human space, represented something greater than all the stars, fleets, and empires combined. It represented survival, mystery, and power, something that could not be challenged, even by the most advanced species. And so, the legend continued. Stories were told in quiet voices, in secret meetings, and among children who loved to imagine distant stars. But no one ever crossed the border. No one ever questioned it openly. And every time a new species rose to power, they were taught the same lesson. Human space was untouchable. It was the end of the map. It was the place where curiosity ended and fear began. Some wondered if humans themselves had built the barrier, or if it had been built by the universe to protect them. Others said it didn't matter. What mattered was the result. The galaxy had learned a lesson long ago, and it remembered. Every species, every empire, every traveler who ever looked at the map would remember it, and no one, not even the most reckless adventurers, dared to cross that boundary. In the end, human space remained a mystery. It was a silent warning, a boundary of survival, and a testament to a species that had earned the galaxy's respect without ever showing itself. And as the stars twinkled in the darkness, the edge of the map remained unchanged, waiting silently for anyone foolish enough or brave enough to question why. No one ever did. Long ago, before the edge of human space was treated with fear and caution, there were explorers who did not care about warnings. They were curious, ambitious, and perhaps reckless. A coalition of 5 species, each with their own fleets, decided to venture into the uncharted region that no map had dared to name. The decision was celebrated across their worlds. Flags were raised, speeches were made, and sensors were tuned to record everything. The galaxy had never seen a more ambitious mission. The expedition consisted of hundreds of ships, some large, some small, each equipped with advanced technology. They carried scientists, historians, soldiers, and explorers eager to discover what lay beyond the known stars. From the outside, it looked like an ordinary exploration mission, but this was different. They were not just mapping new worlds. They were challenging a boundary that had been respected for centuries, a line that had remained unbroken since the earliest days of galactic history. As the fleet approached the edge of the familiar map, excitement filled the air. Scientists monitored energy readings, historians studied the stars, and pilots navigated carefully through asteroid fields and nebulae. The atmosphere aboard each ship was tense but hopeful. Everyone believed they would be the first to uncover the secrets of human space, to bring knowledge and glory back to their species. At first, nothing seemed unusual. The stars continued to shine, planets rotated as expected, and sensors recorded familiar energy patterns. The explorers laughed and joked. They sent messages back to their home worlds, sharing images of planets that seemed untouched and beautiful. Their confidence grew, with each passing hour. Surely, they thought, this was only a new, quiet part of the galaxy waiting to be discovered. Then the first signs of strangeness appeared. Communication systems began to flicker. Sensors picked up faint anomalies in the space around them, ripples in gravity, shifts in energy that could not be explained. Some ships reported seeing strange flashes of light, almost like distant stars blinking out of existence for a moment before returning. The crew shrugged at first, blaming technical malfunctions or interference from nebulae, but the anomalies became more frequent, more intense, and impossible to ignore. The fleet pressed on. Exploration was their mission, and retreat was not an option. Soon, reports came of ships losing power completely, systems failing one by one. On some vessels, navigation instruments went haywire, showing impossible readings. Ships that had been traveling together suddenly found themselves alone, separated from the fleet by invisible forces. Panic began to grow, but the leaders insisted on maintaining course. They could not turn back now, not after all the preparation, not after all the sacrifices. Then, disaster struck. One of the larger ships carrying scientists from 3 different species vanished without warning. Its crew had sent a final message before disappearing, a message full of confusion, fear, and a single phrase repeated in multiple languages. Do not go further. Turn back. That was all. No coordinates, no explanation, just a warning that chilled the hearts of everyone who received it. The fleet slowed, but curiosity and pride pushed them onward. They could not leave without discovering the truth. Another ship disappeared in the same manner, followed quickly by another. Within days, entire sections of the fleet were gone. Those remaining tried to communicate, tried to regroup, but the signals were weak or completely erased. The strange energy that had started as flickers now seemed alive, as if space itself was reacting to their presence. It was then that the first unmanned probes were launched. These small machines were designed to explore and return data even if their crew could not survive. The probes entered the strange region ahead of the fleet, sending back images and readings that were both fascinating and terrifying. Planets appeared to shift position slightly when observed. Stars seemed to blink and fade unpredictably, and energy patterns moved in ways that defied known laws of physics. The probes themselves began to fail. Some returned with corrupted data, others sent back only static. One probe, when finally recovered, displayed a single message across its screens in multiple languages. Do not approach the blue worlds. No. One understood what it meant at first. The phrase was repeated in the logs of ships that disappeared, in the failing probes, in garbled transmissions. It became a warning that seemed to come from everywhere and nowhere at once. Scholars debated its meaning, but none could find an answer. The fleet, now reduced and shaken, had to make a choice: return to safety or continue pressing into the unknown. Pride and curiosity, combined with the desire for glory, drove them forward. The consequences were immediate. Ships began to experience strange phenomena that no one could explain. Crew members reported seeing visions of worlds that did not exist, hearing whispers in languages they had never learned, and feeling an overwhelming sense of dread that seemed to come from the space itself. Even the strongest soldiers and the most rational scientists could not resist the growing fear. It was as if the universe itself was warning them, demanding that they turn back. Still, a handful of ships continued. They were determined to reach the heart of human space, to understand why the maps ended where they did. And then, one day, all contact with them was lost. Entire fleets vanished in an instant, leaving nothing behind but silence. Space swallowed them as if they had never existed. Not a single signal returned to their home worlds. It was as if human space had erased them entirely. Weeks later, one probe returned. Its hull was damaged, instruments melted and warped. The data it carried was incomplete and mostly corrupted. Yet within the fragments, there was something extraordinary. The probe's log showed fleeting images of enormous structures, landscapes, that defied physics and energy patterns that seemed alive. The final message, repeated across every recording, was clear: do not approach the blue worlds. The story of the lost expedition spread quickly across the galaxy. Scholars debated what could have caused such a disappearance. Some said humans themselves had created defenses unlike anything else. Others suggested that some natural phenomenon existed in human space, a force beyond comprehension. The truth, however, remained a mystery. No one could explain why entire fleets vanished without a trace, or why the warning was repeated in every surviving log. The incident changed the way every species approached human space. Fear replaced curiosity. Maps were redrawn to stop precisely where the expedition had disappeared. Trade routes were adjusted, and fleets were instructed to avoid the region entirely. Even centuries later, the memory of the lost expedition haunted those who studied galactic history. It became a lesson, a warning, and a mystery all at once. Generations later, historians still tried to piece together what had happened. They collected fragments of data, old ship logs, and stories passed down from survivors and their descendants. But every lead seemed to vanish before it could be fully understood. Satellites disappeared. Records were lost. Even the memories of those who had witnessed the events became unreliable. It was as if human space had been designed to erase itself from the galaxy's memory. And so, the edge of human space remained unchallenged. Every species remembered the tale of the lost expedition, and no one dared approach it again. The stories of vanished ships and strange warnings became part of galactic culture, whispered in quiet voices in academies, fleets, and trade stations. Every species knew the lesson. Human space was not to be crossed. For those who had lived through the expeditions, the fear was not just about humans. It was about the unknown, about a part of the galaxy that defied understanding and control. And for younger species, the mystery became a symbol of what could happen when pride and curiosity overcame caution. Even the boldest explorers, when studying the maps, could feel the weight of the vanished fleets and the silent warning that had echoed across centuries. Do not approach the blue worlds. By the time the galaxy had moved on, the story of the expedition was more legend than history. Yet the warning persisted. It shaped the behavior of civilizations, influenced the development of fleets, and even guided the teaching of young scholars. No one questioned the maps. No one crossed the border. And every species, from the smallest traders to the largest empires, remembered why. The expedition, though lost to time, left a mark that no one could erase. It was the beginning of the legend of human space, the point where the galaxy's curiosity ended and caution began. And as centuries passed, the mystery grew. The stars at the edge of the maps remained uncharted, quiet, and untouchable, waiting silently for a future that might never come. No one dared go further, and no one ever would. Long after the lost expedition faded into legend, the story of human space was still told in quiet voices across the galaxy. Every species knew the warning, and every species obeyed it. But among all the scholars and historians who studied the maps, there was one who could not let it go. Unlike others, this historian refused to accept the silence. They wanted to know why entire fleets had vanished, why the maps ended at a single boundary, and most importantly, why no one dared to question it. This historian had spent years studying old ship logs, broken transmissions, and fragmented archives from centuries past. They had traveled to the oldest libraries, consulted with the most cautious elders, and even risked forbidden archives to gather clues. Slowly, patterns emerged. The stories were consistent. Fleets disappeared, probes failed, warnings repeated in multiple languages. Yet no one could explain why, and that was exactly why the historian could not stop. The historian's obsession was not driven by ambition or a desire for fame. It was curiosity, a deep, burning curiosity that would not allow them to ignore the unknown. They felt a connection to the lost explorers, a responsibility to uncover what had been erased from memory. Every day they pored over old transmissions, cross-referencing timestamps and locations, trying to find any thread that could lead to answers. For years, progress was slow. Data files were corrupted. Historical records were incomplete. Even the smallest piece of evidence seemed to vanish almost as soon as it was discovered. The historian began to notice something strange. It was not just ships and probes that disappeared in human space. It seemed as if the memory of those who tried to study it also faded. Other scholars who had investigated the border could not recall what they had seen, or their logs were mysteriously empty. The historian realized that human space did not just protect itself, it erased attempts to understand it. Despite the risks, the historian continued. They spent long nights in dimly lit rooms, reviewing holographic maps, old star charts, and encrypted data fragments. They interviewed survivors from near the border, listening carefully to every whispered story. Some of these survivors had been part of fleets that came close, and their memories were clouded with fear. They spoke of strange energy waves, of space itself feeling alive, and of an overwhelming sense that something was watching. The historian listened without judgment, piecing together a picture that no one else could see. Eventually, the historian discovered a pattern in the data. There were repeated energy anomalies near the edge of human space, recorded in the logs of ships from centuries ago. These anomalies did not follow natural laws. They moved, shifted, and seemed to respond to the presence of the explorers. The historian realized something extraordinary. Whatever existed in human space was not passive. It was aware. It had intelligence, strategy, and power beyond anything the galaxy had ever faced. Driven by this discovery, the historian decided to take a risk no one else would dare. They would approach the edge of human space themselves. They knew the dangers. They knew the stories of lost fleets and failed probes. They knew that no one had returned to confirm what lay beyond the maps. Yet the pull of the unknown was too strong to resist. This was their chance to uncover the truth, to understand why humans had become a name whispered in fear across countless civilizations. Preparing for the journey took months. The historian assembled a small research vessel, equipped with every instrument and sensor available. They carried backups of data, recording devices, and advanced protective shields. Unlike the massive fleets of the past, this mission relied on stealth, intelligence, and careful observation rather than force. The historian wanted answers, not confrontation. When the vessel finally left the safety of known space, the historian felt a mix of excitement and dread. Every system was monitored, every sensor tested. The starfield grew sparse as they approached the edge of the map. It was quiet, almost unnaturally so. The historian checked the instruments repeatedly, making sure there were no errors. Yet everything seemed normal until the first anomalies appeared. At first, they were subtle. Communications would flicker. Instruments would register false readings. Energy spikes appeared on the sensors with no source. The historian felt the same sense of unease that survivors had described centuries ago. And then, the anomalies became stronger. Lights on the instrument panels would dim and flicker. Navigation systems would shift slightly. Even the gravity readings seemed to fluctuate. The historian understood that they had crossed into the unknown, into a region where the normal rules of space no longer applied. Despite the fear, the historian pressed on. Every record they had studied told them that hesitation could mean failure. They moved slowly, carefully documenting every anomaly, every irregularity. And as they approached deeper into human space, strange phenomena began to appear outside the vessel. Stars seemed to shift. Planets appeared where none should exist. Shadows of massive structures flickered across the void, structures that seemed alive and constantly changing. The historian felt a growing sense of awe. Whatever was here, it was not just powerful, it was beyond comprehension. Hours turned into days. The vessel drifted silently through this strange region, instruments recording data that would later be invaluable. The historian began to notice patterns in the energy waves. They moved with purpose, almost like a living organism observing and responding to the vessel. It was clear that something or someone did not want intruders, and yet there was no sign of traditional life forms, no ships, no armies. Only space itself seemed aware, intelligent, and alive. During this time, the historian reviewed the ancient logs of the lost expedition once more. Every warning, every strange phenomenon, every sudden disappearance now made sense in context. The humans had created, or perhaps awakened, something in their space that could protect them without firing a single weapon. It was subtle, invisible, yet absolute. And it had endured for centuries, ready to respond to any intruder, any curiosity, any threat. The historian realized the enormity of what they were witnessing. Human space was not just a boundary. It was a living record of survival, intelligence, and defense that no other species could match. And the humans themselves, they were part of it, but perhaps in a way no one could understand. The historian felt both awe and fear, knowing that they were witnessing something that had shaped the galaxy itself, something that few would ever comprehend. As the vessel continued to drift, the historian recorded every detail. They knew this information could be dangerous if revealed too soon. Other species were not ready to understand the power contained within human space. And yet, the historian also understood the responsibility of knowledge. It was not enough to fear the unknown. It had to be studied, carefully, patiently, and with respect. Eventually, the historian decided to return. The anomalies were growing stronger, and the feeling of being observed was almost unbearable. They did not know what would happen if they pushed further. But even in retreat, they carried with them a new understanding. Human space was a place of mystery, power, and intelligence that no other species could challenge. The maps ended there for a reason. The warnings were real, and the humans, whatever they were, whatever they had created, were not to be underestimated. When the vessel returned to known space, the historian shared only fragments of the journey. Data was encrypted, instruments analyzed, and only small reports were released. The galaxy listened, but few could grasp the true scale of what had been discovered. Human space remained the boundary of curiosity, the place where maps ended, and where fear and respect continued to coexist. For the historian, the experience changed everything. They understood why generations of explorers had vanished, why warnings had been repeated, and why no one dared approach human space. The humans, it seemed, had not only survived, they had created a space that was untouchable, a living testament to their ingenuity and power. And the galaxy, despite its curiosity and ambition, had no choice but to remember and obey. The story of the historian spread quietly, inspiring awe, caution, and wonder. They became a reminder to every species that some mysteries were not meant to be solved easily. Human space was more than a boundary. It was a lesson in survival, intelligence, and respect. And for those who dared to study it, the lesson was unforgettable. No one could say for certain what lay beyond the edge of the maps. But everyone who heard the historian's tale understood one thing clearly. Human space was the line the galaxy could not cross. And the humans who lived there had earned that boundary with centuries of silence, power, and mystery. After months of preparation and careful study, the historian returned to human space more determined than ever. The previous journey had given them insight, but it had also revealed how little anyone truly understood. The strange energy waves, the living patterns of space, and the vanished fleets were all pieces of a puzzle that no one had solved. Now the historian wanted proof, something tangible that could explain what humans had created, why the galaxy feared them, and why maps ended at their space. Guided by old fragmented data, the historian aimed for a region near the border that had once held human relay stations. These stations, as old records suggested, were abandoned long ago but might still carry echoes of the humans' network. The idea was risky. No ship had returned from within human space in centuries, and even the historian knew that approaching these relics could be dangerous, yet curiosity and the need for understanding outweighed fear. The journey was silent and tense. Instruments hummed softly, and every anomaly was carefully noted. Strange energy pulses flared occasionally, and the historian felt the familiar sensation of being observed by the invisible presence that seemed to guard this space. It was not threatening in the usual sense, but it was aware. The historian adjusted shields and sensors, moving cautiously as the old maps guided them toward the relay station. Finally, after weeks of navigating the uncharted void, The station appeared. It drifted like a ghost among the stars, its hull, worn, faded, and partially damaged, but still intact. The historian's ship moved closer, scanning every surface. Signs of human engineering were evident in the station's design, sleek, functional, and far beyond anything the galaxy had seen at the time it was built. Despite the centuries, the station seemed almost alive, humming with energy that sensors could barely detect. Entering the station was like stepping into history. The interior corridors were empty, but signs of past activity were everywhere. Data ports lined the walls, consoles blinked with intermittent power, and old recording devices sat in place as if waiting for someone to arrive. The historian moved, carefully, documenting everything, fully aware that even touching the wrong device could trigger unknown responses. As they explored, the historian discovered a central control room, larger and more advanced than any of the smaller consoles. A single human terminal remained active, its interface flickering with faint light. The historian approached, hesitant but fascinated. This was the moment they had been waiting for, the chance to uncover knowledge that had been lost for centuries. They activated the terminal and began the slow process of decryption, carefully working through the complex human system. Hours passed as the historian worked. The station seemed to hum in response, almost as if it was aware of the intrusion. Finally, a message appeared on the terminal, not in any modern human language, but in a sequence that translated into multiple galactic tongues. It was a record, a log left by humans centuries ago. The historian read eagerly, every word filling gaps in the story that had been missing for generations. The log described events that were nearly unbelievable. It told of a time when hundreds of alien fleets had entered human space, confident in their superiority and unaware of what awaited them. The humans, according to the log, had prepared defenses unlike any other species could imagine. These were not simple weapons or fleets. They were systems designed to adapt, learn, and respond instantly to threats. Ships vanished not because humans attacked them directly, but because the system neutralized intruders in ways that left no trace. The historian felt a chill. The log explained why every species remembered and obeyed the boundary. It was not only fear, it was respect for intelligence and power that could not be challenged. Humans had created a network that extended across space itself, an invisible web of defense that could detect intruders, erase memories, and protect their world without firing a single shot. Every missing fleet, every failed probe, every warning, transmitted in multiple languages, was a result of this system. The log went further. It described humans as deeply strategic, patient, and meticulous. They did not rely on brute force alone. Instead, they used understanding and foresight, creating defenses that the galaxy could not see or anticipate. The historian realized that the fear surrounding human space was not a legend or superstition. It was based on centuries of real events. Humans had shaped the galaxy's perception of them through a combination of advanced technology and subtle control over their space. As the historian continued to explore the station, more records appeared. Some were personal logs from human operators, describing the day-to-day work of maintaining the system. Others were technical manuals, explaining how energy fields could manipulate space, how signals could erase memory, and how intruders could be guided away without direct confrontation. Every detail reinforced the same lesson. The humans had created a level of control and protection that no other species could match. The historian felt a mixture of awe and fear. For centuries, humans had remained a mystery, a small but powerful species at the edge of the galaxy. The log showed that their power was not obvious because it did not need to be. It existed silently, effectively, and absolutely. The historian realized that any attempt to challenge human space would not only fail, but might vanish entirely, leaving no trace, just as the old legends had said. Among the records, the historian discovered a final entry, marked differently from the others. It was a warning, left for future generations who might stumble upon the station. The message was clear. Curiosity is dangerous beyond this point. Observation is allowed. Intrusion is not. The space itself protects us. Respect it. The historian paused, reading the words again and again. This was not a threat, it was a statement of fact. The humans had created a system that worked silently and perfectly, and it had endured for centuries without direct engagement. The historian documented everything, making copies and backups. They carefully avoided activating systems that could interfere with the station, knowing that even small mistakes could trigger the defenses. Each recording, each piece of data, was a glimpse into a civilization that had mastered survival, strategy, and intelligence in ways the galaxy had never seen. Hours turned into days as the historian studied the station. They walked through empty corridors, observed the subtle hum of energy, and listened to faint recordings left behind. It was quiet, yet alive. Every surface, every system seemed designed with purpose, as if the station itself understood the importance of the knowledge it contained. The historian realized that this was not just a relic, it was a living archive, a repository of human achievement and protection that had survived the centuries to teach the galaxy a lesson. Finally, the historian decided to leave. The data was secure, recorded, and backed up. Every detail was noted, every observation carefully documented. As they departed, they looked back at the station, drifting silently among the stars. It was a testament to human ingenuity, caution, and power, a reminder that even the smallest species could shape the destiny of the galaxy. Returning to known space, the historian reflected on what they had learned. The myths were true. The warnings were real. Human space was not simply the end of the map. It was a boundary of survival, intelligence, and respect. The humans had created a system that protected them and ensured that curiosity beyond their borders would never threaten their existence. Every species that obeyed the maps was not only cautious but wise. They remembered lessons they might not fully understand, lessons that had saved countless lives over centuries. For the historian, the journey had changed everything. They had seen firsthand the scale of human intelligence and the subtlety of their defenses. They had understood why the galaxy feared them and why no one dared cross the boundary. The humans were not just survivors. They were masters of strategy, patience, and foresight. And the galaxy, despite its curiosity and ambition, had no choice but to respect them. The historian shared the findings carefully, knowing the truth was powerful and potentially dangerous. Fragments of the journey were discussed in academic circles, inspiring awe and caution. Yet, full disclosure was impossible. The systems humans had created were still active, still aware, and still capable of erasing intrusions if necessary. The galaxy would continue to respect human space, not just out of fear, but because the humans had earned that respect through centuries of planning, intelligence, and unseen power. And so, the legend continued, stronger than ever. Human space remained a boundary, a mystery, and a lesson. The station, floating silently among the stars, preserved the truth for anyone brave enough to discover it. And for the historian, the knowledge gained was both a gift and a warning. Some mysteries were not just to be observed, they were to be understood with care, respect, and humility. No fleet would dare cross the boundary. No probe would succeed without consequences. And every species in the galaxy would continue to remember why the maps ended at human space. The historian returned to known space with more questions than answers. The human relay station had revealed a glimpse of what lay beyond the maps, but it was only a fraction of the truth. What disturbed them most was the realization that human space was not just protected, it was alive in a sense that no other species could understand. Every system, every record, every energy signature seemed to be part of a network that observed, calculated, and responded. It was as if space itself had become a sentinel for humanity. For weeks, the historian pored over the data collected from the station. Every log, every recording, every energy trace was carefully analyzed. The more they studied, the more complex the system appeared. It was not merely a defense, it was a memory. It remembered fleets that had entered the space, signals that had been transmitted, even thoughts and actions of intruders to some degree. The historian realized that this memory was not static. It adapted, it evolved, and it protected humans. Without direct intervention, the historian's understanding grew slowly. Unlike traditional defenses which relied on weapons or fleets, the human system worked through subtle manipulation of space and perception. It could isolate intruders, erase or corrupt their memories, redirect probes, and neutralize threats. Without visible confrontation, entire fleets could disappear without a trace, leaving only fear and confusion in their wake. The historian now understood why human space had remained unchallenged for centuries. No species could overcome a system that worked silently, intelligently, and automatically. One night, while reviewing the energy patterns from the relay station, the historian noticed something new. The anomalies were not random. They formed patterns like a network responding to the historian's own presence. For the first time, they felt that the system was aware of them, not just as an observer, but as an active participant. The realization was both thrilling and terrifying. Human space was not merely a location. It was a living, thinking mechanism designed to protect humanity at all costs. Driven by a mix of fear and curiosity, the historian decided to return to human space for further observation. This time, the goal was not to explore physically, but to study remotely, sending instruments and drones that could interact with the system without putting a crew at risk. Every measurement was taken carefully, every signal cross-checked, and every anomaly recorded. Even at a distance, the system responded. Signals were rerouted, data scrambled, and subtle changes occurred in the readings. It was as if the space itself was testing the historian, probing their intentions and deciding what was safe to reveal. The historian's instruments captured fleeting glimpses of structures and energy fields, unlike anything previously recorded. Massive constructs, invisible to conventional sensors, shifted and adapted in response to the probes. Patterns emerged that suggested a level of intelligence far beyond any known species. It was clear that humans had not just built a defense, they had created a network capable of learning, evolving, and controlling the environment around them in ways that seemed almost magical. As the days passed, the historian uncovered the most astonishing discovery yet: the memory lock. The system had the ability to erase or alter records of any intrusion, ensuring that knowledge of its true nature could not spread beyond human space. Entire fleets, explorers, and probes that had once dared to enter had been removed from history, not physically but from memory and records. Civilizations remembered only fragments, vague warnings, or nothing at all. The memory lock was not malicious, it was protective. It ensured that no one could accidentally discover the full extent of human power and disrupt the balance of the galaxy. The historian felt a profound respect for the humans who had designed this system. It was not just about survival, it was about foresight, strategy, and intelligence. Humans had created a mechanism that allowed them to remain safe without ever needing to fight directly. They had preserved their existence through subtlety, cleverness, and patience. The historian realized that this was a form of power that no fleet or weapon could match. In reviewing the decrypted logs, the historian found descriptions of encounters from centuries ago. Fleets that entered human space had been guided away, trapped, or quietly neutralized. Messages sent back had been altered, corrupted, or erased. The surviving fragments warned in multiple languages, "Do not approach the blue worlds." These warnings were not idle threats. They were carefully calculated to preserve both humans and the galaxy itself. The historian marveled at the precision and patience of this approach. No species could have survived such challenges without the intelligence of humans guiding the defense. The more the historian studied, the more they realized that the system was still active. Even centuries after it had been built, it had learned, adapted, and continued to protect. Any direct intrusion could trigger responses that were impossible to predict. Space itself could bend, energy could interfere with instruments, and memory could be altered. The historian understood that they were dealing with a level of sophistication that far exceeded conventional understanding of technology or strategy. Despite the risk, the historian could not stop observing. Every new measurement, every new log, Every pattern in the energy fields revealed more about human ingenuity. They noted how the system could anticipate movement, detect intent, and neutralize potential threats long before they became real. The historian realized that the humans had not relied on brute force. They had relied on intelligence, strategy, and control. And it worked perfectly. The historian also reflected on the philosophical implications. The memory lock meant that the galaxy's knowledge was incomplete by design. Entire histories had been erased to prevent escalation or misunderstanding. Civilizations had been spared conflict, fleets had been protected from destruction, and curiosity had been tempered by the invisible hand of human space. The historian recognized that the humans had mastered not only survival, but also subtle governance, controlling the flow of knowledge and power across the galaxy. One evening, as the historian reviewed the latest data, the system reacted again. Signals shifted, instruments fluctuated, and for a brief moment, it was as if the space itself was communicating. The historian felt an almost human presence, calm, calculated, aware. It was a reminder that human space was not passive. It was alive, thinking, and always observing. And the humans had created it this way, ensuring that no one could challenge them without understanding the true risk. The historian's respect for humanity deepened. They understood why every species obeyed the boundary. It was not superstition, fear, or legend. It was experience, reinforced by centuries of invisible intelligent protection. The humans had created a system that ensured their survival, maintained order, and prevented chaos in ways that no other species could replicate. The historian realized that this was not only a lesson in strategy, it was a lesson in wisdom. As the historian prepared to leave, they carefully documented all findings. The memory lock meant that their own records were vulnerable, so every detail was encrypted and stored in ways that would survive interference. They knew that the truth of human space could not be fully revealed to the galaxy. But understanding it even privately was enough. The historian had glimpsed the full scope of human power, and it was both humbling and inspiring. Returning to safe space, the historian reflected on everything they had learned. Human space was not just a boundary on a map. It was a living defense system, a memory, and a testament to human intelligence. Entire civilizations had learned to respect it, not because of threats they could see, but because of power they could not. The memory lock ensured that the galaxy remained safe, while humans remained protected and unseen. It was a balance of knowledge, strategy, and caution that had endured for centuries. For the historian, the journey confirmed a truth that few others could grasp. Humans were not the largest, fastest, or most numerous species in the galaxy, yet they had become untouchable. Their intelligence, foresight, and control of space itself had allowed them to shape the perception of the galaxy, ensuring their survival, without direct conflict. And the historian knew that this knowledge would change how they thought about power, strategy, and respect forever. The lesson was clear. Some mysteries were not meant to be challenged directly. Some knowledge was meant to be understood carefully, with humility and caution. Human space was more than a boundary. It was a system of protection, intelligence, and strategy that would endure as long as humans did. And for those who dared to study it, the truth was both inspiring and terrifying. No fleet would dare enter, no probe would succeed without consequence, and every species in the galaxy would continue to remember why the maps ended at human space. It was a line drawn, not out of fear alone, but out of respect for a species that had mastered survival, intelligence, and the art of being unseen yet untouchable. After weeks of studying the data from the relay station and analyzing the patterns of the memory lock, the historian finally felt they were ready to draw conclusions. Every observation, every log, every energy trace pointed to one undeniable truth. Human space was not simply a boundary. It was a living testament to human intelligence, strategy, and survival. It had endured for centuries, shaping the galaxy's perception of humans without a single direct confrontation. Returning to known space, the historian began to share findings with a select few trusted scholars. The reports were carefully encrypted and fragmented, ensuring that sensitive details could not accidentally spread. Even so, the impact was immediate. Scholars who had long believed that humans were minor players were forced to reconsider. The evidence was overwhelming. Humans had not only survived countless threats but had mastered a form of power no other species had approached. What fascinated the historian most was the elegance of the system. Humans had not relied on brute force or overwhelming numbers. Instead, they had created a network capable of learning, adapting, and responding to intruders invisibly. Fleets had vanished, probes had failed, and memories had been erased, all without humans ever showing themselves. It was not a weapon. It was intelligence embodied in space itself, and the galaxy had respected it instinctively, generations before. Fully understanding it, word of the historian's findings spread quietly across civilizations. It was shared in private councils, academic forums, and strategy meetings. The reaction was consistent, awe mixed with fear. Species that had once considered challenging human space now realized that doing so would be more than reckless. It would be suicidal. The humans had built not just a boundary but a lesson, and the galaxy had learned it the hard way, long before the historian arrived. The historian continued their research, documenting every detail of the relay station, the memory lock, and the invisible defense systems. They realized that human space was more than a protective barrier. It was a living archive. It remembered fleets, intruders, and probes, adapting to each new situation. It could anticipate threats, neutralize them subtly, and ensure that knowledge of humans' true power remained controlled. The galaxy was not aware of the full extent of this intelligence, and that was exactly how humans wanted it. In reviewing centuries-old logs, the historian pieced together the history of human space. Fleets that disappeared, probes that failed, and warnings repeated across languages were all part of a carefully maintained balance. The humans had ensured their survival not through dominance, but through strategy, foresight, and patience. They had learned that direct confrontation was unnecessary when intelligence could protect them silently. As the historian studied the patterns further, they realized that humans had also accounted for the morality of their system. The memory lock was precise and controlled. It did not punish unnecessarily. Ships were guided away, knowledge was subtly erased, and intruders were left unharmed in most cases, except for the effects of disorientation or lost memory. It was a system that enforced safety without cruelty, a measure of restraint combined with absolute effectiveness. The historian was humbled. They understood why humans had become untouchable. They were small, adaptable, and patient, but they had transformed intelligence into a form of power the galaxy could not challenge. The lesson of human space was clear. Survival was not about size, strength, or aggression. It was about understanding, planning, and foresight. And humans had mastered it in ways no other species could match. Slowly, the historian began to share a broader vision with trusted scholars. The galaxy itself had changed because of human space. Empires had learned restraint, explorers had learned caution. Entire civilizations had learned to respect boundaries not because of immediate threats, but because of unseen intelligent systems that could observe and respond beyond comprehension. Humans had shaped the behavior of the galaxy without ever appearing directly. It was a lesson in influence and strategy that no one else could replicate. One of the most profound realizations for the historian was the patience of humans. The memory, lock, and the invisible defenses were not quick fixes. They were designed to endure. Entire fleets and generations of species had encountered human space, yet humans remained unseen. Their power was subtle but absolute, enduring across centuries, untouched by time. The historian realized that this was why maps had ended at human space for so long. The humans had created a boundary that no species could question, and the galaxy had respected it instinctively. With this understanding, the historian began preparing their final report. It was not just a record of observations, but a lesson in strategy, intelligence, and restraint. Humans had shown that survival did not require violence alone. They had proven that knowledge, foresight, and subtle control could protect a species in ways that brute force could not. The historian wanted future generations to understand this, even if the full mechanics of human space remained hidden. The historian also reflected on the personal lessons learned. They had faced fear, uncertainty, and the unknown. They had seen fleets vanish, probes fail, and space itself react to presence. They had confronted the power of a civilization that had mastered survival in ways few could comprehend, and through it all, they had learned humility. Respect for intelligence, strategy, and foresight was more important than courage or aggression when facing the unknown. Finally, the historian returned to their home world to share the findings with a broader audience. Carefully, they presented the story of human space, the relay station, the memory lock, and the lessons humans had taught the galaxy. Audiences were silent, absorbing the implications. It was not a story of fear alone, but a story of intelligence, strategy, and the subtle power that comes from understanding one's environment and adversaries. The historian concluded with a reflection that resonated across civilizations. Human space was a line that should not be crossed, not because humans were cruel or aggressive, but because they had mastered survival in ways that no one else could. Their intelligence had created a space that taught respect, caution, and humility. Every species that approached the edge had learned this lesson, whether they understood it or not. In the years that followed, the galaxy continued to respect human space. Maps remained unchanged. Fleets avoided the boundary. Explorers studied it only from afar. And the legend of humans grew, not as conquerors or warriors, but as masters of strategy, patience, and foresight. The historian's work became a guide for future generations, emphasizing respect for intelligence, understanding, and the unseen forces that could shape the galaxy. The story of human space ended not with confrontation, but with understanding. Humans had created a system that endured, a memory that preserved their power, and a lesson that shaped civilizations for centuries. The historian had witnessed it firsthand, learned its secrets, and shared them with care. And as the galaxy moved, to the edge of the map remained unchanged, silent and untouchable, a testament to the intelligence and foresight of humanity. No fleet would dare enter. No probe would succeed without consequence, and every species, every civilization, every scholar who studied the history would continue to remember why the maps ended at human space. It was a boundary not of fear alone, but of respect for a species that had mastered survival, intelligence, and patience. Humans had shaped the galaxy not through violence, but through understanding, subtlety, and invisible power, and that lesson would endure for generations to come. The historian closed their final report, a deep sense of fulfillment settling over them. They had uncovered the truth, understood the lesson, and preserved it carefully. Human space would remain the edge of the map, a silent guardian, a mystery, and a testament to the power of intelligence and foresight. And in the quiet of their study, the historian finally understood the full scope of the human's legacy, untouchable, unseen, and absolutely respected.